Welcome to the NerdNest podcast. I'm Sarah Montgomery, NerdNest social media manager. In the description of this video, you can find the links to our YouTube and, well, you're on the YouTube, the links to our blog and our website and our social media sites. You know the drill. My guests on the podcast this week are
Daniel
and Ayana.
They've been here before. You know them. Hopefully. I'm sorry I brought you. Anyways.
What?
I'm just kidding. I love you guys. We're going to talk about Ant-Man because we went to see Ant-Man the other day.
Yeah.
So, initial thoughts on Ant-Man. Go.
Spoilers.
Oh yeah, by the way,
yeah.
Obviously there were
saw
going to be
it,
Ant-Man
so.
spoilers. So, if you don't want to hear that, then
Watch the video.
turn away.
Come back.
Obviously, we can avoid like storyline-wise for Ant-Man just because I feel like a lot of Marvel movies have this issue. The storyline wasn't very interesting. I mean, it was just a bad guy.
Like,
Okay,
yeah,
so
but the thing with the bad guy,
Doing a bad guy
Darren Cross, was just like, Hank Pym didn't tell me he was really Ant-Man, so I'm upset. So I'm gonna make the particle myself and be my own superhero.
okay, no, well, okay, so when I watched the movie, I felt like it was more of a setup for this to be included in other movies, because Marvel does that where they like introduce a new superhero and they're not necessarily interesting and they don't really like work to make this movie like a big blockbuster hit, but I think they released this movie as a setup. I don't think they really cared about the plot. I think they wanted to hurry up and get this movie out.
I think that's one issue
so they
with
can
the
get it.
universe.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that them doing a bunch of setup movies doesn't help the Marvel Cinematic Universe much. I do agree with you that Ant-Man was like that, because as we saw, like, one of the biggest lines that everyone talked about was when there was that chain of things when Falcon was talking to the reporter lady, the
Yeah.
super fine chick or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was like, I'm looking for someone with powers. Like, what kind? We've got one that jumps, we got one that swings, and we got one that walks, like, crawls on walls.
Yeah.
Which is like a Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Which was the biggest thing in there, and everyone was like, oh my god, Spider-Man. And I thought the movie itself, I liked it. It was cool. It was funny. It had some moments when, and it made fun of itself, you know, because Ant-Man has always been kind of that character that everyone's like,
Really? An
he's
ant?
a tiny. Oh,
Yeah.
so you have human strength, but the size of a peanut.
Cool.
It's not even a peanut.
It's an ant. Sarah. Why'd you need It's ant. You didn't even make another
Peanut
word
Man.
for it.
No, maybe it's
Look.
Peanut Man.
Look.
It's the size of a peanut.
Shut.
Yeah, I think that's one main issue with the cinematic universe is that they do that.
I-
Where they do this thing where they're trying to build up to these huge movies like Civil War and Avengers, but it kind of leads up into a lot of setup movies, which ultimately don't really serve anything but just to show one character.
But I kind of like how everything weaves together. I know, like, the setup, it seems like a cheap shot, like, hey, let's just go ahead and get this movie out, get some money, and we can have a setup for later. But I like the way the Marvel Universe weaves everything together. Because everyone's predicting that the PIM molecules or particles will be used in Civil War. And then and also
Makes sense.
it has been like the quantum realm was introduced in this movie, so everyone's like, oh yeah, that's gonna be put in with the Infinity Wars.
I also
when the
think
Infinity
they're
Gauntlet
gonna
comes
have
in.
Giant Man is gonna be in Civil War. Like Ant-Man's also gonna be Giant Man, so he'll be able to grow super big too. And obviously the introduction of Wasp was kind of a big thing. It was, you know, the poster came out and I was like, oh look, it's Wasp. That was like I saw Hope's haircut and I immediately was just like, this is very clearly gonna be Wasp.
Yeah.
It's like no shocker there. I think that's the
That
credit
was a
scene.
lot of this movie.
The first credit scene, everyone was like, yeah, you mean yeah, good, but
Whoa.
it's kind of obvious.
Wasp? No way.
Fucking crazy.
I thought that was an issue with that movie because they focused a lot on introducing Ant-Man, but it was very predictable in a lot of ways because you know in the very beginning you see Scott messing around with the part on his belt saying, I think I can make this better, and then Hank's like, no, don't do it. Why? Because it'll go subatomic. What does that mean? You'll keep shrinking forever. And
Yeah.
I wonder if that's gonna play in
Probably
later.
gonna
It's just
happen.
so ridiculous.
Yeah, I thought that it makes sense that my thing with the movie was I liked it, but I didn't expect the pacing to be that slow.
Yeah.
Because there was not a lot of action scenes. There was a lot of like it was it was a lot like a heist movie.
Which
Yeah,
is
it
fine.
was.
Which is fine.
Which is
Yeah.
fine. It's cool and it's a little bit different, but it was a lot slower paced than I thought it would be.
Than Marvel movies.
Yeah, because most Marvel
Right.
movies, they like run through the plot.
Not that I
and
don't,
shove
but
it
I don't
into a
need
movie.
like all action the whole way through. That's fine, and especially for a movie with Ant-Man where it's a lot of character setup. It's important to have character setup and story building, but it was still a bit slow paced. I also was kind of, I mean, I knew this was going to happen obviously because they told us that Michael Douglas was playing Hank Pym and he was an older character, so I knew Hank Pym was going to be older, but I don't know why. Like we said, when we found out they're making Ant-Man and Age of Ultron, we assumed they would mention that Hank Pym created Ultron.
Yeah.
But instead they went with the whole, nope, it was Tony Stark.
Because
that
probably
made
Ant-Man's
Ultron.
biggest contribution to the Marvel Universe is the creation of Ultron.
Yeah.
And you just take that away from him, and now you're introducing him into the universe. So he's just useless.
They're a guy. I
Cool.
like you said, the way they tie it into the universe. We're talking about. I've been trying to keep this kind of technology out of the hands of the Starks my whole life. I'm not going to give it over to them now. Like,
And, okay, so I'm gonna bring this back to like the whole the little credit scene. What was the
the end credits
The second one.
I think it was the second one. Yeah,
with
the
Falcon,
very last
Captain
one,
America,
yeah.
and Bucky Barnes.
And how he was like, oh yeah, well I know a guy who can help us with the Winter Soldier, and I think there's like a lot of speculation that for Captain America Civil War that it like having Ant-Man will bring him onto the side of Captain America because you know how they're gonna be facing off against Tony Stark and like his
Yeah, because it
science and
says
his
in there
technology,
it's
and
like
Hank Pym will be like, yeah, I will help you against Tony Stark in the Civil War
Yeah.
because I don't approve of what Tony Stark does. I don't approve of his methods. The fact that he uses science to hurt people and he uses science.
I mean, they're very money driven.
Yeah,
Starks are.
yeah,
That's
well,
how they're viewed.
You know, well, like Hank is like, I do
Intelligence.
science for the love of
Especially
science.
because
Intelligence
Hank,
for intelligence.
you know, he was Ant-Man in the 80s
Right.
when they showed that one flashback, and no one even heard of him,
Right.
and no one even knew that existed. And then Iron Man or Tony Stark is just so public about him
Yeah.
being Iron Man. That's probably something that
He's really
Hank doesn't really
flashy.
like about
Yeah.
him. Is he just kind of gets on his nerves. So you could definitely see Ant-Man being led on Captain America's side.
And
I
I
think-
also realized like I feel like why Hank Pym in the 80s was like really like secretive
Mhm.
because he didn't want to get like have Starks like zoom in on his technology.
Yeah, and that's been the same even in the comics. It was like that where Hank Pym creates the Pym particle, and then he realizes the destruction that it can wreak and the amount of damage that it can cause, and he's like, okay, maybe I should stop and think about this for a little bit because that's a bit.
Yeah.
I don't know what this can do, and if this falls into the wrong hands, there could be some serious issues.
Yeah.
So that makes sense, and it was like that in the movies. I'm kind of wish we'd seen more of Hank Pym, though.
Yeah.
Because he's
He's an
really,
interesting character.
He's a really interesting character. He's a really smart character. Like even Reed Richards didn't have the ideas to come up with a program as complicated as Ultron in the comics. He wasn't even close to working on that. Maybe it was because he was working on
I mean, they
interspace travel.
kind of do different. They focus.
Yeah,
on
and
different
that's
things,
fine,
sure.
but like
Yeah.
the level of artificial intelligence that Hank Pym was working on was so advanced, and you'd think that they would mention that because that's such a big part of his character. Not that I don't like Scott Lang, I do like Scott Lang, and maybe they didn't do the Hank Pym thing because that controversial thing where he hits his wife Janet, like Wasp, the original Wasp, but I mean.
I think there's a couple of reasons why they decided to go with Scott instead of Hank. Mostly people can agree that Hank is the Ant-Man.
Mhm.
He's kind of the quintessential one. Like there's other versions of a lot of heroes, but you know the first one's always kind of the universally accepted one
Yeah.
in most cases.
Like Hal Jordan is.
Barry Allen is Flash,
Right.
stuff like that. So Hank Pym, the reason they probably decided to go with Scott was it makes sense to me because they're doing Civil War, and so it's not this lame scuffle between 7 friends. They're basically adding Scott and Hank and Wasp
Okay.
instead of just Hank and Wasp.
Yeah.
So they're just maybe it
More
was
characters.
part of their
A
way. of
faster way to build
just
the
kind of
universe.
adding more people to it.
That makes sense.
That makes sense to me.
I mean, I
They're
really
just trying
like
to get
I
some
like
more
Scott Lang's Ant-Man. He's
people.
really fun, and I think that Paul Rudd did a really good
Oh,
job
yeah.
as a
He's
musical.
good at being funny. He's
He
really
was
good at being
really
funny.
Like all of his
funny.
movies that he's been in,
He's hilarious.
I've enjoyed him.
And
It's weird to adapt.
his friend,
I was not ready for that.
his friend, I think Penna, his last guy, the actor's last name, Michael Penna, I think is his name. That guy was so funny.
Oh
Every
my
time he
God.
started telling the story, he's like, yeah, so we had some wine, we're talking about this. It's like,
And we went at the art museum.
and you know I'm more of a cubist, like, what?
He was
It's
hilarious.
like, okay, but not those details. That was absolutely, like, the comedy in the movie was on point, and
And I think that was definitely the purpose of it. Wasn't to be action packed. It was more just a funny journey,
Yeah,
a nice ride.
Yeah,
and
I
even the
enjoyed
action
it.
scenes were so taken lightly.
Yeah, I enjoyed it because it was like a new type of superhero film. It wasn't like just like, oh yeah, there's a bad guy, we're gonna defeat the bad guy. It's all action, it's all angst, and like
Yeah.
it was still like.
I don't think the Marvel Universe is angsty though. I think the Marvel Universe has a formula, which most universes do, which I'm not going to criticize because it keeps you consistent. But it's generally like, villain shows up, hates the world and wants to destroy the world because of reasons. In Loki's case, it's to get back at his dad / Thor, and in Ultron's case, it's because humans are bad. And in
I
Darren
think
Cross's case, it's
I
because
never-
wah, I'm a little baby, you
I
didn't
don't-
give me the
yeah,
love I
I
deserve.
I don't know about you guys, but I've never really thought, exception to Loki, none of the heroes are very interesting in the Marvel universe.
They're all very one-dimensional. They're
Yeah,
very,
I mean,
they
it's
all
just.
have very
I
similar
mean, even
motivations.
Loki in the first Avengers had the same premise of, humans should be enslaved. That's my goal.
Because I'm an Asgardian, that's
And,
why.
and it's pretty,
Which is
and it's
weird.
like so obvious that they're the bad guy. It's like, okay, he wants to take over the world, stop him.
Yeah.
Ultron wants to destroy the world, stop him. Like
Right.
it all follows that and which is what annoys me is that a lot of the heroes are so boring, and they focus so much harder on the heroes instead of the villains.
They really try to make it more dimensional in the Marvel Universe, but the only way that they do that is by making their heroes.
Relying on their heroes to be good villains,
Yeah, which is weird.
and I see that as just make a good villain. And you, dude, because
Hopefully,
villains
I
are
think-
so interesting
I
when
agree.
you see the multiple dimensions of when you get in their mind and
Yeah.
see,
Yeah. Like,
wait,
what
they
makes
kind
sense
of
to-
have a point. They
Makes
could be
sense.
right, and it makes you second guess.
And I think hopefully we'll see that with Civil War. You
Oh,
know? Because Civil War is one of the more interesting storylines in the Marvel Universe, as I
very
think
good.
Infinity Wars is as well. But Civil War is mostly about the heroes. So they're going to have to talk
And
about the
yeah,
heroes.
something Civil War does that Infinity Wars doesn't is the whole conflicting sides.
Mhm.
Because everyone kind of disagrees with Thanos,
Yeah,
I mean,
so
I'm
that's
here to
another-
destroy the universe.
Yeah, that's another just
Bad guy,
who has
bad
like
guy.
one reason.
Where this is kind of, you see both opinions. And they do a really good job at one moment you see Iron Man, like Iron Man's totally right here. Captain America's stepping his bounds.
Yeah.
And you see for a second Captain America makes a point, you're like, oh, that's a good point. Ooh, Captain America may be right. And
Yeah.
you always go back and forth,
And
which I always like.
those are interesting storylines where there isn't necessarily a definitive good versus bad.
Yeah.
And I think those are the stories that I personally enjoy, where there is that gray area and there's a room for interpretation and a way for you to look at it and go, I totally side with this person, but I absolutely see their point.
Yeah.
And it's a good way to get more people to come. Because, Ant-Man, right? Everyone kind of knows what's about to happen. Bad guy shows up, Ant-Man, you go there and Ant-Man stops him.
Mm-hmm.
That's the formula. And, the main reason why people go is because it's a part of the universe.
Yeah.
And they kind of want to see the
Yeah.
cutscene and, keep track. But what's good about those is, you can get people, it doesn't follow the formula of, well, obviously Iron Man's going to beat this guy.
Yeah,
It's going to be who's going to win. I think Iron Man's going to win. You have a buddy that said Captain America.
Yeah. And I think, what I will say to
Captain
Ant-Man's
America.
credit,
It's
right? Well, what I will say to Ant-Man's credit is that I think of the cinematic universe, Scott Lang's Ant-Man is one of the more interesting heroes.
Yeah, it's just funny.
Yeah.
And he has
Captain
a
America
cool-
is very straightforward. I'm a soldier, I'm gonna protect the world. Iron Man is like, I used to have
But I
money
saw
motives,
And
I
now-
saw the light because with a near-death experience, and now I help people.
Yeah.
You've got Hulk who's like, I have a bad side, but I try to do good because I want to be good.
Yeah.
And then Thor, I
He's
like
a-
James, so I protect him.
He's just kind of a guy.
Yeah, he
he
does
just,
whatever he
he
wants.
just tries
He's
to
a protector.
defending the nine
He's just
realms.
a general protector, so he protects Earth.
And he
And
likes the
then
Avengers.
Black
so
Widow,
help them.
her whole
Oh,
I'm trying to
nice.
clean my ledger thing, I want to prove to myself and
Same
everyone
with
else that I'm a good guy.
Hawkeye.
And same with Hawkeye. Whereas Ant-Man, you've got this whole thing
I'm a
where
criminal.
he
Yeah,
is like, I'm a
criminal.
criminal, I'm doing this mostly for my daughter, but it kind of changes for, it needs to be more Like
Yeah.
it needs to be
And
more.
you see that when he gets accepted to the Avengers,
Yeah.
the cutscene, and the end credits cutscene.
Yeah.
You kind of see that he's actually seeing a future to what he's doing.
Yeah, because he realizes like, yes, I basically just did this in this small, isolated reasoning for I want to protect the world and make this a better place for my daughter. I want to prove to my daughter that I can be a good person,
Yeah.
even though I've done a lot of crime in the past,
Right.
and I'm still doing crime,
And also
but
he
it's for a
like,
good reason.
and he also like redeemed himself because like everyone in the town like I guess was like, oh yeah, he's a criminal. He's like no good. He's a bum. He won't really achieve anything. And
He
then
works
I
at Baskin Robbins.
That was
Oh my
hilarious.
God.
There are so
The
many
pink-
good scenes.
They talk about that. The Marvel people are talking about that. They're like, how did you decide on Baskin Robbins? They're like, well, originally we
Supposed
wanted
to be
they
Chipotle.
wanted Chipotle to be
Yeah,
their thing.
and then they
And
changed
then
it.
they could, Chipotle was like, I don't know if we want that associated with our brand.
Why?
Yeah, I know,
Because
right?
I mean, I agree. I understand how it's like I'm like it's free publicity
It's a
to
movie.
Chipotle.
Yeah.
I see it as a
But
movie.
they're like, yeah, but
like
he's
we-
an ex-con
and he
lying, and we
fired him.
we fire a future hero.
Yeah.
But
it's-
Baskin Robbins, I think.
and
But
then, like,
the whole time you're not
colors,
sitting there like,
cute
come on,
colors.
The
Baskin
pink-
Robbins. You're just like, that was a funny scene.
Yeah. It
So,
was
you know,
bright pink colors.
I
I'm not gonna
understand
walk
being-
into the closest Baskin Robbins
Yeah,
with
whatever.
picket signs going, rehire Scott Lang.
like,
How
that was
dare
the
you-
movie. That,
You
what are you
fired
doing?
an American
yeah.
hero.
I guess I understand it, but I would have, if
I-
I was like the head of a company, I'd be like, yes,
Yeah,
do that. That
seriously?
sounds awesome.
Like ser-
I
feel like
told
they
you
should-
that, so I think so.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I feel like Baskin Robbins gave like more of a punchline, I guess.
Because it was so like
yeah.
bright, especially their uniforms with the pink polo shirt.
And the cute
And a
pink
hat.
hat.
Also, that whole scene was just hilarious. The guy was like, because I worked at Brewster's, and I can tell you from experience that is exactly what it's like working in an ice cream shop. So the guy was like, yeah, can I just like what's
burger?
hot? Like, can they like a chili dog or something? Like, do you
It's
know
so
where you
ice
are?
cream.
Do you
I don't know.
understand how this works?
I don't know why that stuff is so funny to me, but just when you see that level of sheer disappointment, and you're just kind of like,
It's like,
dude. Like that and bro, it's just when people just get so disappointed, they're like, bro.
like I
Come
always
on.
love the customer service thing and just like, I'm sorry, but
I think that's some of my favorite comedy. I don't know why it's so funny to me,
I
but I
think it's
love it.
hilarious.
Yeah.
But it was super funny. It
Oh
was a
my
great
gosh.
movie for its comedy.
It was a funny movie and it had.
Very predictable, but
I
it was
liked-
funny.
yeah.
It introduced Ant-Man well.
I thought the special effects were really cool. How
Oh my
Ant-Man,
God, the
Ant-Man's
train
transformation, the
thought the
combat,
combat
it
was
was
neat.
really fluid. I was kind of worried about it that it would be kind of like really, like,
And you even
Weird.
see Hope when he was fighting Falcon. You see him surprised about it too, because you see him jump as the ant, and then he grows back into his human size, and he's already in position to take him down.
yeah.
There's some really just neat ways how he maneuvered using that his
Of course,
ability.
Like the golden scene was when Thomas the Train like
Just, and the
That
movie
was
constantly
the
making fun
house.
of like, and Anthony's death was.
oh my
she
gosh.
took this especially
Anthony,
hard.
Cause like I was
What are
like,
the
oh yeah.
chances, dude?
Yeah,
That's so
the-
ridiculous.
that brings up a good
That's
point.
scene that-
That is one of my biggest complaints about Ant-Man, is that there were multiple times in the movie where you're like,
Are you serious?
really?
And
Like,
the bullet.
Like you trusted that you paid off this girl to tell her
Oh,
boyfriend,
that was so
to
crazy.
tell his friend,
Like, how
to
did
tell
that
his
happen?
cousin,
Not, yeah, he
to
literally
tell you.
he got a money.
There could've been
an envelope
easier
full
way.
of money and just dropped it in a car. Like, that'll do
Yeah,
it.
like honestly, I
Fine.
feel like
Done.
it didn't require that much money. Like how much money was in that envelope?
Right, but it's only like,
Like gosh.
but it seemed like everything there was kind of like really like okay, but the chances of that, like
Yeah.
the bullet hitting
The-
Anthony, really?
Because I saw that
Or
scene
any
as him
ant.
just shooting into a swarm. Like, do you really
And
expect
he
to hit
hit
something?
Anthony.
And then he just
He
hit.
killed
Not only
all
happens
the
to
ant.
hit one,
But he
not,
hits-
but he
he
hits
hits
the
the
one
one-
that Ant-Man's on and happens to hit right below
And
Ant-Man.
doesn't
Like,
hit
oh,
Ant-Man.
it's
gosh.
no
the
way.
sheer chance.
And
of
it
that.
doesn't like destroy one wing. One single wing is left.
Right, and
But
if
all
you
the
see it
Anthony is
floating
just
down,
destroyed.
like, I'm sorry.
I mean, I
But it was
understand.
touching
The
scene.
movie,
Like, I
the
know-
movie element was very weak,
Right.
but the comedy
It
and
was- the
the
comedy-
introduction
made
to
up for
Ant-Man
it.
was
But you,
so
like you
comedy.
tell yourself like, okay, I've got to suspend my disbelief a little bit, but there's still that part of you that goes, you can't shoot an ant with a bullet.
And then the scene
Yeah.
where she was like, "Oh yeah, to control the ants, you have to clear your mind completely. You can't have any thoughts.
Yeah, I
Now
get
think
the.
of your daughter.
Yeah.
Think of how much you want to save your daughter. Like what?
No, was like one of those cheesy moments where you're just like, okay, that's.
Oh, and the kissing scene.
I liked it.
I know,
They showed
yeah,
it.
yeah.
That was a little.
Yeah,
bit.
yeah,
There's a lot
I
of
knew they
predictable
were
Oh, of
getting
course it was
together,
predictable. We knew they were gonna get together, but I like that it wasn't that big on-screen dramatic like.
I love you. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
you
that
give
line-
me,
saved me.
you
that
give
line
me
was
hope.
ridiculous.
It's like they could have done something super cheesy with their name, and they didn't.
Yeah.
Which, props to them for doing
And
that.
then he was like, "Oh, like really? I expected more of you. Like you're kissing me, like in front of your dad's house. Like, hope I expected."
I like it.
Come on.
I mean, they do a good job, but you can. I think the people making those movies are smart enough to tell that, people are realizing what they're doing is kind of predictable.
Mhm.
So they make fun of it. Like you open the door and like, oh no, they're kissing. No one saw that coming.
Yeah.
And then they kind of make fun of it.
Yeah,
Like,
the
okay,
reaction.
Alright,
they do
so
a great job.
we kind of have to start wrapping up. So, like, last thoughts on Ant-Man. Would you see in Ant-Man 2? Or would you want there to be
the
an
cool
end?
thing about an Ant-Man 2 is there's no beginning and there's no end. Assuming it's not a trinity. I'm thinking.
Trilogy?
Trilogy. Thank you. Jeez. if they do like a trilogy format, which they seem to be doing with the rest of their heroes, I would definitely see it because you don't have to begin
more
something, you
versions
don't have
of
to end
Ant-Man.
something. So then, you can actually just focus on the story. So I totally see a second one.
I would see it depending on how they use him in Civil War, or if they even use him in Civil War.
I would agree with that.
They have to use it in Civil War.
Yeah,
They're going to,
Yeah.
but I'd like to see how the character Wasp is
yeah.
and how they interact with each
I
other.
don't think Wasp is in Civil War.
I don't think she is.
We're gonna see her in.
But
Infinity
I'd
War
really
or
be
something.
interested to see that because if it's one of those things where Hope is still trying to prove that she's deserving of the title, then I'd kind of be annoyed. But if they kind of tag team, they work well together, then I'd be okay with it.
Yeah.
I'm excited how they're building up to Infinity War.
Yeah.
They're
Oh my
doing a
gosh.
great job structuring the universe.
Because it's not Avengers versus Thanos. It's like everyone, like
The
Guardians of the
versus
Galaxy, everyone.
The
It's
whole
gonna be a
universe.
huge fight against one person. And I'm excited.
It's just gonna be cool. I'm really pumped. There's a lot of good superhero movies coming out in the next couple years.
Seriously, this
all I'm
2016 is pretty good for superheroes.
yeah, like it's gonna be some
gonna
good
be-
times, good movies, and
Mhm.
endless entertainment.
Alright.
I'm excited.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much most of what we have to say on Ant-Man. Links again in the description. Check out our blog. Comment, let us know if you want them back on or what you want us to talk about next week, and we'll see you next week, guys. Bye-bye. Wave.
Bye. Don't tell me what to do.
What?
Oh, God.